Okay, now I'm going to take a moment to introduce and read Dr. Forrest's bio. So Dr. Forrest of Through the Forest offers guidance, education, and support to family and professional caregivers impacted by dementia through her Dementia Coach on-call services. She has over 40 years of clinical practice, education, and research in geriatrics, pain, dementia, palliative, and end-of-life care. She's held facility roles at the University of Illinois, at Chicago, and Rush University, previous board member of the Illinois Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, Chicago End-of-Life Care Coalition, and the Alzheimer's Disease Advisory Council of Illinois. She's an author of journal articles and book chapters on pain and geriatric-related issues. She's collaborated with the Alzheimer's Association to study the outcomes of comfort-focused care for residents with advanced dementia in nursing homes. She's provided palliative care and dementia training in various regions of China. She's an active advisory council member of the Dementia Society of America, where she has hosted 36 DSA national webcast episodes. And that's before her work at Forth. And if you guys know Jeannine, she does a lot. So she's a member of Session. She's a current chair of the Spiritual Formation Council. She's an active member of the Widening Our Welcome Committee and a newcomer to the Personnel Committee. She lives with her beautiful wife, Laura Lee Larson, and their 3 adorable cats, an awesome aquarium, freshwater fish. Okay, again, I'm going to remind everybody to mute, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Forrest.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, women at Forth. Thank you, everyone who has taken the time and the energy to be here today. I know you have a lot of other options, and for people who are joining us online, thank you as well. Dementia 101. My intent is to not make you feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. I want to kind of give you sort of the basic overview. For the people in the room, you have a copy of what's called the Big Umbrella. I am thrilled that I was a part of this and creating it with the Dementia Society of America. We will have the link available for people online, and it's something you can also send away for free. So the Big Umbrella I'll be referring to, and I hope that will augment what we're talking about today. So I'm here to talk about how do we best understand the cognitive and behavioral changes, and then add to that effective communication strategies. I'm in a house of strangers. That was the line my mom said to me 30 years ago. And it still brings me to tears. And I knew I was practicing it as a nurse, but I didn't know what to do, how to respond, was not well educated in this, and this was over 30 years ago. So I figured out pivotally, if I couldn't take care of my mom, I wanted to take care of someone else's mom or dad. So that's how this got started. So what is dementia? I want to make sure you leave here having sort of the same nomenclature. Think of it as an umbrella term, generic term. And under it, it covers a very broad spectrum of some diseases, some are brain injuries, some are brain insults. And it's a syndrome of different physical and cognitive changes. It is not a normal part of aging. So on the screen, I have this big umbrella. And there are over 200 plus different conditions that present itself as a dementia. You're probably more familiar with Alzheimer's disease. That's just one form of dementia. I'll go over a few in detail, but it also includes things like Korsakoff syndrome, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, normal pressure hydrocephalus. So a wide variety falls under this umbrella. What it does, if someone has a dementia, It means that it impacts the ability to perform everyday cognitive functions, tasks, and ultimately it leads to a loss of independence. It also affects what we call motor control or muscle control. The brain is this amazing organ, and that's the organ that's being impacted. So ultimately people lose the ability to walk, hold on to bowel and bladder control, and so on. Now the interesting thing that each of the dementias start off a little differently. It presents differently, and I'll show you that. At this point, many are progressive, and many have no cure. All that being said, I don't want you walking out of the room thinking, oh my gosh, where's my antidepressant, right? I'm here to tell you, based on my practice, research, and family experience, that quality of remaining life can be supported well. It's not all bad all the time. And that comes from a combination of drug and non-drug sort of modalities, mostly non-drug. And that's the good news. The good news is that each of you are being empowered, I hope by the end of today, with some tools that you will learn how to support perhaps a neighbor, a colleague, a family member going forward. But it takes work. I tell my clients, none of this is intuitive. It makes no rational sense, some of the things I'm going to be sharing with you. So it takes careful planning, maintaining a support system. It takes your willingness to learn how to communicate differently. You adapt the physical environment, the social environment, the spiritual needs. Spiritual needs are so essential to many. And then we'll talk about connecting through the arts and the importance of moving. If you've heard of the DSM-5, it's a manual that kind of houses a whole variety of conditions. And the way dementia is talked about in the DSM-5, it's again another umbrella term of a number of neurological conditions. The major symptom is a decline in brain function due to physical changes in the brain. It is distinct from a mental illness. Dementia is not a mental illness. It's clear that there's cellular structural changes in the brain. Now you may have heard the term MCI, mild cognitive impairment. This is not dementia. It's kind of that gray zone where the person may be aware that I'm not thinking as clearly like I used to. Family, friends notice, but it's insufficient to interfere with daily living. It's just on that borderline where people are forgetting more, language may be less effective, judgment issues, but it's not dementia. It's a precursor. The good news is some people revert back to normal. Perhaps there's an underlying etiology. It could be, for example, someone is diagnosed with hypothyroidism. Severe hypothyroidism, which slows down your metabolism, can present itself as a dementia. There can be a lot of brain fogginess in this. But if we correct and give the right medication, people bounce back from that. So that, I think, speaks to the importance of making sure you are medically sort of evaluated, because there are things that are happening that we need to rule out. On the other side, 10 to 15% of people with MCI go on to develop a dementia within 5 years. So, that may be new to some of you. And it's not dementia all the time. There's other things that could impair your cognitive functioning. Poor sleep. I don't know about you. If I don't sleep well, I am not at my best the next day. Infections. This is a big one in older adults. I can tell if someone has a bladder infection just if they get confused. They may not mount a fever. The first thing that typically, and we're, gosh, I'm getting closer to that, 65 and older. So if I get confused, think, Jeannie, you might have a bladder infection. Some other, pneumonia, something like that, will cause changes in mental status first. Excessive alcohol use, anything that impairs blood flow to the brain, and that includes high blood pressure, diabetes, and there's this mantra we say, anything that's good for the heart is good for the brain, directly connected. So that's why people with a history of diabetes, high blood pressure, have a higher risk for developing dementia because of that blood flow issue. And then you're hearing a lot in the news about football players, or people, the risk of concussion, CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So you have multiple concussions, insults, that also impairs the brain. And then you see how we rule all sorts of things out, and then we talk about dementia as a possibility. To be diagnosed with the dementia, it takes a while. And we're fortunate in Chicago that we have multiple centers at Rush, Northwestern, multiple here. There is often a 6-month waiting list to get an appointment. So it includes things like medical history, and then the person's interviewed, their primary person who may live with them or know them the best is interviewed, because the person may lack insight into anything is wrong, but it's the family members who's like, no, my husband, something's going on, and he has no clue. And then there's neurocognitive testing, lab testing, spinal fluid, brain scans, genetic testing. So it's this process of elimination. Hot off the press, just this month, in the Journal of Nature and Aging, a blood test, research was done to find a blood test, this was in the United Kingdom, as a biomarker. There's a specific protein that we're looking for. Interestingly, it has a very strong predictive ability 10 years out. So you took this blood test today, and this protein is in your blood. It could be that within 10 years you develop either an Alzheimer's or a vascular dementia. It doesn't rule out everything. And interesting ethical issues. Would you take the blood test? The other problem, it has limitations. It was done primarily in white people, all white people, so we have no idea in terms of the diversity and if that makes sense in people of color. So let's look at what are the clues. These are the behavioral and cognitive changes that was in the title of this presentation. In DSA, Dementia Society of America, we say the 22 clues. When I worked for the Alzheimer's Association, it was the 10 warning signs. But these, I think, are more nuanced. When I talk about these, I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, I've got drooping eyelids, I'm in trouble, right? That's not it. The idea here, it has to be unusual, inappropriate, or excessive. That's the key here. It's not where you lost your keys and oh my goodness, I get this all the time. Do you think I have dementia? I'm losing my keys. I just say you're probably multitasking and not paying attention. What I want to drive home, it's more than just memory loss. More than memory loss. So that's a prominent feature. You'll be able to read through all these in the book, and people online will give you that link. But I just want to talk about things that are probably less known. Well, the poor judgment. It's going outside in the middle of the winter with your robe on and, no shoes. It's could be uncontrollable crying or laughing. The getting lost in familiar places. Problems with your senses, especially smell, taste, vision, and hearing. Changes in walking and balance. Quite often you have much more of a shuffling kind of walk. People bend forward. The list goes on. Sleep issues, the apathy. Here's one. My husband sits in front of the TV and does nothing all day. He used to be involved in all sorts of things at church, a lot of activities, and now he doesn't want to call anyone. He's just sitting there. It is worth investigating. One of the things we look at is this depression. We have to rule all those things out. The swearing, the disinhibition, the aggression, that's a very, I'm prone to swearing, and if you know me, so that said, it is unusual for the person. This is, in its most bizarre sort of things. I had a client once who, very wealthy business guy, could have bought and sold Walgreens. And he walked into Walgreens and he started hoarding and stealing all sorts of things in his jacket. Like, huh? So the idea is to be curious. That's really out of place. I emphasize again, dementia is not a normal expectation of aging. Aging is the #1 risk factor, but if everyone who was older, then everyone would have this dementia. So the numbers are growing because people are living longer. So if you haven't seen a brain lately, here you go. It's about 2 to 3 pounds, and we take our brains for granted. When they're working well, wow. It's when they're not working well, it's like, my God, what an amazing miracle organ it is. Because it's things you don't even pay attention to, because they're just automatic in a way. So I'm going to go over about 4-ish types of more prevalent types of dementia. The first one you're probably familiar with is an Alzheimer's related dementia, AD. Here, it's the noticeable short-term memory loss. So it's the asking the same question over and over and over again. What are we doing today? What are we doing today? Problem with abstract thinking. So that means if you write checks, figuring out your bills. It's the more complex executive functioning work. It's slow and steady. I talk about like this iceberg that keeps floating. Difficulty following directions. Most are older onset, 65 and older, but there is a subset of people, what we call young onset. That's people younger than 65. I've cared for people in their 40s who develop dementia. Here's another one, vascular dementia. This is correlated to people with high blood pressure that's not well regulated, or mini strokes. So what you're going to see, oh, you know what, and I want to go back to the Alzheimer's. I want you to see on this slide the normal brain on the left. The tissue, it's full, it's spongy. Very different on the right. That's the brain with Alzheimer's disease. Look how it has shrunk. There's tissue damage. And I give this to you because if you have a loved one or if you know someone who's developing a dementia, quite often the frustration is, oh, why are they doing this to me? They're driving me crazy. There's structural changes. They cannot help themselves. But it's hidden. It's behind your cranium. People look fine on the outside, and you have no clue all that's happening on the inside. So this is also a way of developing your own coping skills, is not taking it personally. It would be as if, I use this analogy a lot, Laura Lee had a cast on her leg, broke her leg. And I said, come on, honey, let's go run a marathon. Well, she'd say no in the first place, but she would say, my goodness, Can't you see I have this cast? Why are you asking me to do that? Well, quite often this is the scenario that's set up. We're asking people to do things with brains that are changing. And the onus is not on them, the onus is on us, with hopefully the intact brain, to make the necessary shift and changes in terms of communication and things. So going back to vascular dementia, look, it's different. You see the little white sort of patchy areas? That's dead tissue. That's necrotic tissue. It's tissue because of these mini strokes, not enough blood flow to the brain. Hence, that area, whatever that controls, it doesn't work anymore. So it's different. People with vascular dementia, it could happen suddenly. Could be after stroke. Memory is less impaired right away. It's more problem-solving issues. And there's gait problems, so they're a little more risk for falling. Here's one, Lewy body dementia, LBD. The cell structures change. So there is what's called Lewy body kind of cells. It's a different form. People present this way, vivid dreams, wild dreams. I've had people beat up their partners in bed because they were sure this person was attacking them or was a stranger in their bed. I've had vivid hallucinations. I used to visit this lady. Every time I would go, she would say, "Look at those little green people outside my window," and describe them in great detail. And it was every visit. It wasn't like, oh, it was just happening now. It was and I saw her 6 months. So very real to the person whose brain is changing. There's no way I would have said, there's no green people out there. I don't see any. That would not have been helpful. To her, they were real. To her, is that frightening to you? And that wasn't. What was frightening to her, she saw little kids staring at her all day. That didn't exist. So interesting presentation. There's also fluctuating alertness. Awake, and then 5 minutes later, almost somnolent. And it isn't because they didn't sleep well, but our brains control our alertness. And so that was being involved. Involuntary movements, there could be some tremors. Parkinson's disease. Not everyone goes on to develop a dementia, but some go on to develop a dementia with Lewy bodies. And here's one, frontal temporal dementia, FTD. This is a very difficult type of dementia, especially if you're the care partner in this. You'll look at major shrinkage in the frontal area. This is our cortex, frontal cortex, where all the executive functioning happens. This is the planning. This is controlling sort of your emotions, insight. In general, people have no insight to the fact that anything is wrong with them. And it's incredibly frustrating. I had a woman who was a grandmother and was so mad that her kids wouldn't let her take her grandchildren across the street to the park. Well, she had no idea how to cross the street anymore. And to her, damn it, why aren't you letting me take my grandkids? And so often it gets very confrontational. And it takes a lot of nuanced communication skills to deal with this. FTD is one where the disinhibition happens. This is where you have this very proper Presbyterian woman walk into Jewel and starts to take off all her clothes. So it's you know, the strangeness of this is one of the hallmarks. And it's younger onset can be more likely at times. And then to make it even more complicated, you can have a mixed dementia of a little bit of different things. So I hope you have an appreciation or starting to appreciate how challenging this is to find a, quote, cure because of all these underlying different conditions. I don't know if there'll be a magic bullet to make this go away. In terms of stages, we categorize them early, middle, late, and final. It's variable. And you will see, as everyone's journey is their own, quite often the late and final last the longest. Average duration, and again, this is average if we're looking at Alzheimer's, 8 to 10 years, but I've worked with people for 20 years. We also know that people have developed this condition 15 to 20 years prior to symptom presentation. And it takes that long for the changes in the brain to actually show up, because we have many, many, many neurons in our brain. And so it takes a while before things are noticed. So 15 to 20 years. So a lot of the research is looking at people in their teens and 20s and what you can do differently at that level to modify if you are going to be predisposed. We talk about change in daily living skills. So we start off, what you'll see first is impact instrumental activities, meaning managing finances. Quite often it's the financial advisors like, they're spending a lot of money on, late night buying things and money, and this is what puts people at risk. Such vulnerable financial scamming. People prey, unfortunately. The bad people prey on people with this who are showing that they have no real concept of how to save or manage their finances. Things like shopping, figuring out what to do next, how to use a grocery list, meals. My brother also had vascular dementia, and he was a wonderful cook. And he said, I'm gonna go make chicken. And his wife is like waiting hours later, where's the chicken? Well, he took it out of the refrigerator, put it in the pan, and that was as far as he could go.
Oh dear.
So it's this, what do you do next? What do you do next? We take that so much for granted. Medications, here's one. I don't know, if I have to take more than 2 medicines a day, I'm in trouble, right? To schedule that, it's not uncommon for some people to be up to 10, 15, 20 meds. And you run the risk of not taking one or some of the others. I've had people take their diuretic, get rid of water 4 times a day, and their antibiotic once a day. So now they're dehydrated and their infection is overblown. So you get a sense of that. That's what happens first. And then we start to look at those skills that we learned since we were children. The ability to walk, eat, dress, toilet, those things ultimately become impacted. So I said, I didn't want you to leave here feeling, oh my goodness, wow. There are things that remain. And this is something to hold on to. What remains always till the person takes their last breath is this small portion of our brain called the amygdala. It's responsible for being able to receive love. It's also responsible for scanning the room. It's your fight or flight. Are you safe? Are you in danger? We do this automatically. That's how we survive as a species. We scan the room. Is this person okay to talk to or not? And so what I'm here to tell you is that people will know if you're safe and loving, and they will always be able to receive that love. Not always able to send it back in terms of communicating it back. Empathy is something that also can be impaired. So it's like, well, mom never asked me about my kids anymore. Never asked about me. That's an ability that can be lost, not in everyone. So I'm here to tell you that when they say, should I visit? They're going to forget I was there. I said, yeah, they'll forget. Probably within 5 minutes you were there. But it makes a difference. We actually show PET scans light up, and people have a more pleasant mood for hours after that. In contrast, if you have a crummy visit and don't know how to visit, the same thing. They could be in a terrible mood for hours. So another life skill, why it's important to learn this. I'm not going to talk a lot about treatments, but just know we have some drugs for the past 20 years that are used to slow down some of the symptoms. They only slow down the symptoms in about 50% of the people who take them. So it's not you take your Aricept, you're going to be better. So it's a chemical, experimentation. If it works, great. There's a new drug you probably have heard out, Quemby. This is the first drug used to potentially slow down disease progression. It extracts amyloids. That said, it's an IV infusion every 2 weeks. It's only good in people who are that mild cognitive impairment to early stage dementia. It's not effective later on. And there are a lot of infusion reactions, including brain bleeds, things like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Can I ask you, is anybody doing any work with turmeric or?
Oh, turmeric. The question is any work with turmeric. Yeah, some people are using turmeric. There's not a lot of consistent effectiveness when you look at the studies. I want to talk a little bit about the statistic, and I will leave room for questions afterwards, so just know that. Just a few FYIs. Right now, there are about 6 million Americans living with Alzheimer's disease. That is certainly underreported, because not everyone goes through the whole clinical evaluation. So that's what we kind of know, probably more. A lot of people think, they're just getting older. We used to call it organic brain syndrome, OBS, or senile. They're senile, No, there's something wrong. 1 in 3 seniors die with Alzheimer's disease or another type of dementia, and the cost is astronomical. 345 billion now, expected to 1 trillion in 2050. So there is a national effort now being drawn out by the Biden administration to pull together resources, especially, and have sort of a central packaging so that people who are living, let's say, in the cornfields of Iowa have access to resources, because it's not distributed evenly throughout the United States. I have to also tell you that we have an opportunity as a church, I believe. How many of you, show of hands, are directly impacted by a loved one or someone you know with some form of dementia? Raise your hand. Look around, everyone. And unfortunately, I can't look in the chat at the same time, but my guess is people in the chat are doing the same. So we have an opportunity not only to care for the person directly impacted by dementia, but every one of you who raise their hand are impacted. And we need to be church to these people. The need for education, support, inclusion, learning new skills, supporting the value and the dignity of the person. I say, we're going to look at the person and not the disease. I like to say the soul remains, just like the nesting dolls. That small little inner core never leaves. You can tap into that person in the very advanced late stages, and I'm going to show you an illustration of that. So the core inner being, who we are. We're more than this outer shell. We're more than our ability to walk, our cognitive reasoning. We're more than that, and so the soul remains. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about guidelines, what might be helpful to you. Talked about that amygdala, so you're going to tap into your amygdala. What's really important is if you're caring for someone with dementia, you have to be congruent in the words you say, but mostly how you look and sound. Are you safe? Are you trusting? Are you loving? Is your tone of voice match that? It's the empathy is key. Because people with dementia this is a superpower. I am sure of it. People with dementia, if you look at this picture, those folks are not saying a word. But if you're looking, I don't know, I don't think I'd want to hang out with them. They're looking kind of frustrated, angry. And if you walk into the room, this is what I teach a lot of care providers in nursing homes and other places. How you present yourself and show up has to be loving and caring, not frustrated. Oh my gosh, I've got 10 more patients to take care of, and let's just feed this person and get it over with, and that sense of frustration. Your loved one will know if they want to hang out with you or not. It's also not a skill that we also know you're human, and it's easily that you can develop in terms of frustration. And that's a whole other presentation on caring for yourself. That's a whole other thing. No, that's super important, because if you don't, you can't care for that person well. You're human. A few other guidelines. Position yourself so they can see your face. You don't want to talk from the side. Peripheral vision starts to diminish. More of a tunnel vision. Make sure they can see your face. Eye level. And how you stand in front of someone makes a difference. If I were to stand really close to Andrea and not say a word, this hierarchical position shows sort of, I could be intimidating just from that alone. So, eye level. If someone asks the same question over and over and over again, it's your role to answer it as if it's the first time every time. Don't say, you've said that like 17 times. There's a way of negotiating that. You can bring someone to a different room, perhaps change the topic a little bit, doesn't always work. But your role is to understand that that part of their brain called the hippocampus is eroding. It's our recording button. And when it works well, hopefully all of your hippocampi are working well in this room, you'll be able to take home some of this information. But if it isn't, you might walk out the door and say, what was that about? Introduce yourself first. Don't say, what's my name? I see this all the time. Mom, who am I? Who am I? And if you were ever in school and the teacher asked you a question and you didn't know it, I wasn't going to raise my hand again. I would be shrinking under the desk. And that's sort of that anxiety. I know I should know you, but I don't. So this is don't quiz. What day is it? We're not there doing neurocognitive testing. That's not important. Hi, I'm Jeannie. So nice to meet you. It's also helpful if you have name tags. This is a hard one. Try not to take what they're doing personally. This is not easy, and I know that. It's the brain that's changing. Avoid arguing or trying to rationalize. We live in a hyper-cognitive world, do we not? That's how we do. We argue, we convince, this is why you should do something, and we assume people, because we said it, they should do it. Well, when that rational part of the brain is no longer working, you could be spinning your wheels, and you're both going to be really upset at the end of that conversation. Use uplifting, dignified adult language. It's not, let's put your bib on because you're drooling. Don't infantilize anyone. Let's change your diaper. I don't even say someone's demented. You'll still see that in the medical literature. But it's someone living with dementia. That's a better phrase. This person is living with dementia. This is not a shell of themselves. This is not a child. The person is still there. They're changing, but they're still them. Imagine if you switched places. Heaven forbid, you developed a dementia. Could you imagine someone saying, okay, let's change your diaper now? So this is where we uphold the dignity and the value. And we compliment. We're not pointing out everything they're doing wrong. It could be easy, oh, you forgot to do this, you didn't do this. Oh my God, he tried to fold the laundry and it ended up in a ball. How about, thank you, honey. Ah, I love this. I love your helping me. Thank you so much. The dignity and the value. They're doing their best. A couple other communication guidelines. I said this a few times. Keep in mind the brain is changing on a cellular level. They have no control. Fatigue and anxiety worsen it. So you see this at the end of the day. In the past, there used to be this term called sundowning. I don't use it anymore. It has nothing really to do with sunlight. It has to do with the brain is over fatigued by the end of the day. Imagine waking up and not knowing what to do next.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to figure out, toothbrush, how do I manipulate this? It takes a lot of mental energy for someone with dementia to navigate the day. And by the end of the day, they're exhausted. That's where the agitation and things, easy frustration happens. I talked about remaining abilities. So as the ability to use language changes, maybe just a few words. It could be the same word. I had a client once that all she could say was, "You are my sunshine." That was it. That's the only word she had. And depending on how she said it, I knew she was having a good day or bad day. So it was, "You are my sunshine." Mary, thank you. "You are my sunshine." Ooh, okay, something's not right. So you're constantly paying attention to the underlying tone, not their words. You're not going to say, I don't know what they're saying. It makes no sense. It could be word fragments, word salad. But you pay attention to the underlying tone of voice. "Oh, you sound like you're in a good mood today. Oh my goodness, you seem so scared. Tell me, I'm here with you. Tell me more." Not, "I don't understand what you're saying," and you won't. But "tell me more" says, "I value you're trying to say something and is not happy for you. So I'm going to be present with you in that moment." When people lose the ability to use words, it isn't like, "Well, okay, I can't visit anymore." No, you connect through the senses. And what that looks like are things like this. Through music, you're going to find that music is our incredible connector. I've had people be pretty much mute. And then if we start to sing Amazing Grace, they know all the verses. So music is an interesting phenomenon, and it's a beautiful way of connecting. So I encourage people to hum, sing. You don't have to have a great voice. That's not what this is about. This is about, let's sing together. I have a daughter-mother combo, read poetry to each other. People can still read for a long time. They may not retain what was read, but how nice for this mother-daughter to share poetry books together. Gardening, something tactile, music, painting. That's why the arts are really important. Okay, so now I want to share a video, and then we'll take questions. So what this is Naomi Fell. Maybe some of you have seen this before. But I think it's a wonderful illustration of a woman in the very late stage of dementia, where often people say, "I don't know what to do, I don't know how to visit." And, but I want you to see how she taps into her soul.
When people are very old and deteriorated and no one enters their world and they're just sitting there, they will withdraw inward more and more. And their desperate need for connection is all now inside. And if a person is all alone, even if they're very, very deteriorated, there's a longing for this kind of closeness. Mrs. Wilson? Hello. You want me to sit? Can you see me good? Gladys Wilson is a wonderful example of a person who is in the phase of repetitive motion, where people use movements, repetitive movements, because they don't have any more speech or very little speech, but they have human needs that need to be expressed. You're crying. You're crying. You have a tear right here in your face. You have a little pain. You don't want me to touch you. You're very sad. Can you see me? Is it scary? Are you afraid? And if this person sits with their eyes closed, rocking back and forth, and maybe there's a tear coming down, there's a need there. Here. There's a little tear that's coming out. Do you feel it? You feel a little tear? If you gently use touch, and I touched Gladys Wilson for the fingertips right here on the cheek, is where the mother usually touches a child. If you touch an infant there, it looks up, and every cell remembers where it was touched by the mother. And often that person knows, even if they can't say a word at that moment, they won't talk, or they don't want to talk, but there's a communication, and that person is no longer alone. Can you let me in a little bit? You think? Just a little? You think I could be with you and Jesus for a minute? Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. I used music, because when speech is gone, music, especially with Gladys Wilson, it was religious music, because there's emotion tied to it and safety tied to it. So I used her old church songs. Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. What I did was, when she moved, I moved with her. And when I was singing, because she didn't sing with me, so I matched the intensity of my voice to the intensity of her movement. And pretty soon, for a split second, we became one person. Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. So at one point, when she got very quiet and very peaceful, and my voice became very quiet as hers and very peaceful, and my breathing slowed to her breathing, she pulled me to her, and I moved with her. And for her, at that moment, I believe I was a symbol of her mom. Can you open your eyes now? Do you see me? Feel safe and warm? Yeah? Can you sing? He's got the whole world in his hands. 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 He's got the mothers and the fathers. He's got the mothers and the fathers in his hand. He's got the mothers and the fathers in his hand. He's got the whole world in his head. The breakthrough doesn't happen every time. The person will not always open their eyes and look at you. But if you keep trying and you keep centering yourself and really look at that person and really mirror their movements, maybe not this time, but the next time you come, you'll have a communication. You feel safe? You feel safe? Yeah. With Jesus? Yeah. And me?
Um, Questions? Yes, sir.
I'm going to have dinner with a couple where I suspect that the wife has mild cognitive impairment. Are there topics that are safer or easier for a person to handle, not when they're this severely affected by dementia, but who are maybe on the beginning
Yeah.
side of things?
Okay.
We actually have 2 dinners planned like that, and just interested
Sure,
if
good
there's some
question.
hints there.
And I'll repeat the question for people who are online. So this gentleman is going to be visiting someone for dinner, 2 people who may have mild cognitive impairment. How do you communicate, are there safe topics? So avoid talking about things that require a right or wrong answer. It's also helpful in a group. People get easily distracted. It's harder, like if you're with a lot of people, background noise, so I don't know if you're in a place that you could limit that, maybe not. One question at a time. Don't say, hey, how you doing, Ruth? What's up? What's been going on? To why, and tell me. How about tell me about your day? And whatever happens, she says, it could be that whatever she says makes no sense. You know that didn't happen. Wow, thanks so much. People have a tendency to talk about past events, because recent short-term memory is impaired. So they love talking about their childhood, or tell me, how did you meet your husband again? Those stay embedded for a long, long time. You couldn't ask me what I ate for breakfast yesterday. I couldn't tell you either. But avoid the right or wrong piece and just say, thank you. If she's struggling with words, let them bubble up. Don't automatically jump in to finish the sentence. Give people time to answer, one at a time. And don't make it too long either. You'll see if it's a 2-hour dinner, things typically go downhill that way. Another question. Yes, ma'am.
What is the timeline or window for Lewy body dementia to develop?
Lewy body is one of the hardest to diagnose. I've had people under diagnosis for 6 years before they get the most accurate. Because it presents itself. It's not your typical kind of. And most geriatricians, most sort of primary docs, they're not well educated in this as well. That's the reality. It's becoming better, but not so much. So the Lewy body, again, is one of those. I had a client for 10 years with Lewy body, from diagnosis till she died a couple months ago. And a lot has to do with the support, the social support, their underlying physical health. So if they're pretty darn healthy, they have no diabetes, heart disease, any of those other things, they can last, quite a while, 10, 15 years. But it's also, you look at that in any of the dementias. There could be some other underlying cancer or something else that causes their demise first. So that's why it's hard to have a crystal ball in any of this. I talk with families about learning to live with ambiguity, which is a skill we don't have. We want answers, we want to figure it out, we want to make it all better. And in this situation, I tap into my Stephen ministry skills. You learn how to be present. Other questions? Yes, Anita.
Normal pressure hydrocephalus.
Yeah.
What's the progression there?
So normal, hydrocephalus. So what that means is there's fluid in the brain that expands, gets bigger, and there's pressure on the brain. If you correct and put in a shunt, you can go back to sort of normal. But for some people, there's enough insult or damage to the brain so they develop a dementia after. I'm working with another lady right now, 10 years. Her underlying health is phenomenal. So we don't know. I mean, that's one of those things, if she gets the social support, the movement, all those things I talked about, those non-drug, and check her, she has a shunt in. So I can't give you a range because everyone's a little bit different, but know that it's also a situation where if you develop a hydrocephaly, it could be surgically corrected. But if it did enough damage, then it catapults itself into a dementia. There's a question in the back.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
I always think that I've looked at several workshops and they always talk about certain vitamins,
Uh-huh.
like B12, fish oil. Is there quite a bit of research?
Good question. Yeah, so the question is, what about vitamins? Vitamins are, are a good thing. Is it the cure-all? No. It supports your underlying nutrition. What we know now is, in terms of lifestyle modifications, it's what you put in your mouth. So it's food and movement, that combination. Most of the studies indicate that more of a plant-based diet is much more effective in terms of warding off if you're going to develop a dementia. So, but it isn't where you just eat spinach and then sit in front of the TV. So it has to be both and movement, good blood flow, social support. Vitamins are a part of it, but it's not the end all. And I hope there's no one online or here who's part of the group that, what's the name of that? It's always on the TV where people take this certain supplement and, oh, I'm cognitively more alert now. It's Prevagen. Thank you. I forgot the name of that. Yeah. So buyer beware. The ingredients in there include caffeine.
Yeah.
Take a little caffeine. I'm a little more alert. Yeah. But certainly don't waste your money. Okay. Other questions, and then I'll go to people online. Yes, Annette.
Well, I don't mean to state the obvious here, but I have dealt with two people who have Parkinson's and Lewy dementia. And the problem for the loved one or the family is a huge range, like, should I try to take care of this person myself?
Mm-hmm.
Even when he's trying to strangle me when I'm making breakfast. Should I look for a facility?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to break everybody's bubble, but not everybody who cares for people in facilities likes people. And that becomes a real dilemma. Both of the people I had to deal with, they were spouses, and trying to get the right combination of placement and meds,
Mm-hmm.
and the violence, the whole thing is really something.
Yes, it can be traumatizing. That said, this shows the importance of education and support. I say it over and over again, none of this is intuitive. And the violence doesn't have to be. It's often because of our approach. It's not the dementia getting worse, it's you saying, oh my God, you forgot this again? Oh. Why can't you do this? Why can't you clean up after yourself? What am I supposed to do, follow you around? You leave your underwear on the floor. You're driving me crazy. Well, that executive functioning, knowing how to put things away, is lost. So organizing, putting things back in a closet. So you get things that people can do. You focus on what remains. But that's why it takes the education and the support of, let's say, our community. Of if you know of someone who has a dementia in their family, put them in, get them the resources. I'll put a plug in for the Dementia Society of America. I'm a little biased because it really works with a wide variety of dementias, not just Alzheimer's disease. I'm going to look online, and this might be, if you could put it maybe in the chat, your question, and then we'll end up. This was wonderful. Oh, I'll sign off, okay. Oh, well, thank you, Bernadette, whoever you are. Thank you, okay. Any other questions? You can put in the chat. All right. I want to ask you a question before we close. In that video, what did you learn? What did that video teach you? Touch. The touch.
And love.
Love. The connection. Acceptance.
Meeting the person at their level.
Meeting the person at their level. They're still there. The core, the soul remains. And I wish more people knew that that was possible. Because quite often they're like, I can't visit. What do? I just sit there? Yeah, you sit there. You can sing, hold hands, give a hand massage, all sorts of sensory things. Well, again, on that note, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here, for learning. And is there someone, oh, there's a chat, okay. Did you mention you would send a link for the PowerPoint to online guests? Yeah, we'll do, maybe Liz, you can help me send the link. We'll send that, and there's also the big umbrella link. You'll get a copy of that. Also, DSA has these aware and share cards. This is a cool idea. It basically, let's say you go into a restaurant and your loved one is struggling at the counter or it's just a gentle way of saying, my loved one has, problem with thinking, please be patient. And so that's also available if any of you need that here. So again, thank you for taking the time to learn. I'm available to each and every one of you. And I wish you well today.